I'd like to welcome everyone to the Sacred Safe Spaces webinars. We have created these webinars to help you as faith leaders to address domestic violence. Unfortunately, it's in our congregations, in our communities, and we can take a stand if we know what we're looking at and know how to help. We have Pat Stanislaski here today to help us to recognize it and how to help those who may be victims or abusers of domestic violence. Pat?
Okay, thank you, Estelle. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to do my best to fit all this into a half an hour, but I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about this. And I want to just share with you, if you can see this, if you've seen it before, I'm not sure, but I have been doing this work for about 40 years in the field of abuse and neglect. And certainly part of that often is the issue of domestic violence. So I want to just very quickly play a video for you before we start, just as a kind of reminder of how pervasive domestic violence can be in a community. So I'm just going to share this with you for a minute.
Domestic violence knows no faith.
1 in 4 women experiences abuse in their relationship.
So most likely there are victims of abuse in your congregation.
Don't think it doesn't happen in your church.
Or synagogue.
Or mosque.
Because it does.
It does.
It does.
Learn the signs of abuse.
And how to help victims.
Know the many resources available in our community.
End the silence on domestic violence.
Contact the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council or the Refugee.
Okay, so basically what, don't you hate when that happens?
Chow's Hotline.
What I want to say to you guys is I love this video because it kind of introduces us to this issue. And I never read to people when we have a video, a webinar, but I am going to do it here in case some of you are looking at your things from phones. Of all the social problems confronted by the church, domestic violence is surely one of the most misunderstood and mismanaged by church leaders. I still look back with deep embarrassment on the time when, as a young pastor, I was offended that our women's ministry had invited a special speaker to address the topic of domestic violence at the midweek women's Bible study. I was certain they were simply stirring up trouble where no real problem existed. After all, we were an evangelical church, and abuse did not happen in our church. In my youthful naivete and chauvinism, little did I realize that abuse does happen in evangelical churches. In fact, at that very time, one of the church elders had been beating his wife for years and had put her in the hospital several times. I also did not realize that one of our pastors was about to be arrested for child abuse. Like most clergy, I had gone into the ministry with a deep and genuine desire to serve and help others. But because I was clueless regarding the reality and dynamics of domestic violence, I was unable to minister to abusers and their families. In fact, I might have made matters worse. I share that with you because I think it's how many people feel about this issue of domestic violence. So in that video, we said, learn to recognize the signs and know where the resources are. So one of the things I hope that you all can do as leaders in your congregation is to begin to address this issue and to understand it more clearly. So my goal today is to help you do 5 different things: to understand the legal definition of domestic violence here in our state, to identify some of the signs that you might look for, to re-examine your position, which is what that previous bit of verbiage was talking about, and to talk about it from your position in the congregation. And then once you talk about it, guess what happens? People begin to come to you. So be prepared to provide support to those victims, to their families, and yes, even to the abusers. So here is a very quick and dirty kind of definition from our New Jersey state law. Any one or more of the following 19 things that you see listed here upon what we call a protected person by someone who is an adult or an emancipated minor. And here's our definition of a protected person. 18 years and older or emancipated minors subjected to violence at the hands of a spouse, a former spouse, present or former household member. Sometimes it's somebody living in the house, parent of their child, or a person with whom they have had a dating relationship. And then a few statistics, because I think it's important for us to know how often this happens in New Jersey, because that's what we really care about. Where is it in our state? And certainly some of these statistics are a bit alarming. 26.2% of New Jersey residents experience intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner rape, and or intimate partner stalking in their lifetime, 26.2%. There were 63,420 DV offenses reported by the police in 2016, which was an increase by 3% from 2015. And murders increased 6% in 2016 as compared to 2015. And I want to just make a comment very quickly about these last two. The COVID crisis has clearly increased the number of domestic violence offenses in our state. As people are home, as people are stressed, children pay the price and spouses pay the price. So people living in a household, I think we will find, and we only have statistics like 3 years ahead. We never have the statistics for the current year. That just doesn't happen. So I am sure that when we see these, we're going to find that there is a huge increase due to COVID. Assaults accounted for 43% and harassment accounted for 43% of the offenses in 2016. And then you see down here, COVID has dramatically increased the incidence of DV in our state, DV being domestic violence. So here are some interesting statistics I thought you folks might find of interest. Most frequent day of the week for domestic violence incidents was Sunday, followed closely by Saturday. For the 34th consecutive year, the most frequent hours of domestic violence incidents were between 8 p.m. and midnight, when 26% of the offenses were reported. Children were actively involved or present during 28% of all domestic violence offenses occurring in 2016. And let me just make a comment about children. Children who experience domestic violence are now classified as abused children. So they can be removed from the home, or the offender can be removed from the home, not only on the basis of domestic violence, but on the basis of child abuse and neglect. And that is something that just happened recently in several states. Females were the victims 74% of the time, and alcohol and drugs were involved in 25% of the reported cases. So again, alcohol and drugs, always a factor in domestic violence. 13% of teenage girls in a relationship admit to being physically hit or injured, and nearly 1 in 5 teenage girls who have been in a relationship said a boyfriend threatened violence or self-harm if they broke up. 1 in 3 teens reports knowing a friend or a peer who has been hit, punched, kicked, slapped, or physically injured by a partner. And this one, which we may often not think of, I do workshops on elder abuse because this one is really true. Persons over the age of 60, victims in 22% of the domestic violence murders. And domestic violence offenses involving a firearm increased 9% when compared to 2015. So just another little comment about I'm giving you all this, and you can certainly come back and look at these PowerPoint slides. I'm more than happy to share them with Estelle. Domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking misdemeanors are prohibited. People who are convicted of those things cannot possess firearms. Respondents to final protective orders, including dating partners, are refused to have a firearm permit. And judges may, but underline the word but not must, prohibit responders to temporary protective orders. So these are restraining orders, including dating partners from possessing firearms. And last but not least, judges may, but not must, require respondents to protective orders to surrender their firearms. So these are people who have a restraining order against them to surrender their firearms. They may also order search and seizure for firearms. So just so you know a little bit about the facts in our state. And now we're going to talk a little bit, again, I could spend a whole day on this, so it's a little hard to go so fast, and forgive me for that. But here are some warning signs that you should know. As a person in your position, looking at your congregation, having interaction with folks, look for any of these things that you might see. Frequent bruises or injuries with excuses attached. A lot of times when we injure ourselves, we don't really make an excuse about it. But when people do constantly are explaining how something happened, that causes a little bit of concern. Person becomes unusually quiet or withdrawn and may no longer come to church, right? May realize if they come, they are going to expose the offender, and so they stay out, or they no longer participate in things that they used to participate in. The person is absent from work a lot, or perhaps quit his or her job. This was an interesting one. The person stops talking about their partner. This is a very common characteristic of domestic violence partners, spouses. Stop talking about their partner. And some of that is because in many cases, they're a little bit concerned that they may draw attention to that partner. The person may need to check in with his or her partner or spouse. How many times have you asked somebody, can you do this? And they say, well, I need to check with my partner, with my husband, with my wife. And, we all do that. I mean, come on, we do that when we do scheduling, but watch for it as a pervasive activity. And what is it that you're asking them to do? Is it something you or I would check in with our partner about? Or is it something that seems a little strange to you? And of course, the person wears concealing clothes even in warm weather, and that's a very common characteristic, obviously, to hide the injuries that person might have. So here are some common blaming statements that we hear applied all the time, so much of the time, about domestic violence victims. People assume she chose the offender over her kids and is unable to protect them. I can't tell you how many times I hear people say that. Well, if she really wanted to protect her kids, she'd leave. Those people who say that don't have an understanding of this whole field of domestic violence and how difficult it is, how painful it is for these folks to experience it, and to try to both protect themselves and their children at the same time, yet keep that family unit together. Mostly and many times because the offender is a good person, except when they hurt their spouse, right? They may be very good to the kids. They may bring them things. They may make a good living. So there are an awful lot of things that go into why a person chooses to stay. Assuming she will let him back in, and assuming we know why. Underline that one. I should have underlined that. We all make huge assumptions about other families, and we wouldn't want people to make assumptions about ours, but we have no problem making assumptions about others. And that's a really important point for us to kind of work on. Will she let him back in? Yeah, many times they do, for multiple reasons. They need to have food and rent and everything else that provider may give them. The children are heartbroken. And so the mom tries once more to see if she can make this work. There are an awful lot of reasons behind it. And my only message to you guys is don't make assumptions. Assuming that she lied about it. I know this guy. You saw in the beginning this minister talking about it. He knew these people. He knew this pastor. He knew this bishop. He knew this guy in the community who's upstanding and is the CEO of something or the president of Rotary. She must be lying. He can't possibly do that. So these are, again, assumptions. And then assuming that she is the one who needs professional help. Yes, she probably does, just to survive, to thrive, to get over this. But right now, in the midst of the abuse, this person who is the offender needs professional help. There are batterers groups. There are therapists who specialize in domestic violence batterers. So yes, that's the person who needs the help, not necessarily the victim. And then asking, why didn't you questions? Why didn't you tell somebody? Why didn't you leave? Why didn't you call your relatives? Why didn't you, come to me? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? Why didn't you? Because I was terrified. That's the answer. Because I was too scared. Most of the time, that's the answer, right? So we know a little bit now about the laws. We know about the signs and symptoms. We know about some of the blaming comments we've heard. So let's talk for a little bit about what you all can do to help the situation, to recognize it, and to hopefully either counsel people or most importantly, and first of all, to be able to report it. So let's talk a little bit. There isn't any one way that's the correct way, and that's true of any time we work with our human species. We're all different. Families react differently, people react differently. But here are a few things I would ask you to try to keep in mind if you're working with a victim of domestic violence. The first thing is talk in a safe, private place, somewhere where that victim will not be seen talking to you, okay? Because everybody has ears and eyes, and it gets back to the batterer. I've seen it happen multiple times. Quiet, safe, private place. Secondly, take the time to really listen and believe what you're hearing. Listen with your eyes, with your ears, with your body posture, right? Listen carefully. Don't underestimate the danger that person is in. I know many of you may know that oftentimes when a woman gets a restraining order, which everybody tells her she should do, that is when she is most likely hurt. More women are hurt and murdered after restraining orders than those without. And that's why so many times women are afraid to get them, right? And pregnant women, believe it or not, are hurt more often than women who are not carrying babies. Figure that one out. I don't know. I don't know why. I've yet to find a good reason for that. Express your sincere concern for that person's safety, and I underline the word sincere. Look into his face, her face. Understand how she feels. And I'm using the female pronoun because most of the, almost 80 to 85% nationally of domestic violence victims are women. Look into her face. Let her know that you really mean what you're saying. And this one's really important, folks. Don't expect change overnight. You know, sometimes it's just like in any abuse situation. I can remember talking to children, and sometimes it was a month later when they finally got the nerve, when they lay in bed every night thinking about what I said and thinking, and then finally a month later told somebody. It will be the same way with domestic violence. They're going to think about what you said, and they're going to mull over the opportunities, the options that you might have given her, and don't expect it to happen immediately. This is a huge move for a domestic violence victim, a huge one. And it requires some thinking. It requires them to look at all the things that may happen as a result of your suggestion and how they're going to handle that. So take some time. And whatever you do, please, 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 don't judge or criticize the victim's decisions. Please don't. Sometimes they'll be bad. Sometimes it isn't a good decision. They shouldn't have done that. But you know what? How do you feel when somebody says to you, you know, you shouldn't have done that, don't you? it's hard. It's hard to hear. So always positive, decisions and things that are done, can be undone, can be fixed, can be corrected, right? So just remember to try to not do that. And then, and this one's hard, encourage the person to make her own choices, right? But whatever you do, urge him or her to talk to someone in a confidential setting who knows about domestic violence. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit later about where all the centers are, the numbers you can call. You'll have all those resources to give to him or her. And I would say, in the beginning, you have been trusted, and it is an incredible sign of trust, if someone comes to you. It is probably one of the most honorable things that can happen to one of us, that somebody trusts you with literally with their life. And so you will be able to give them some good resources, some places to go, but you will not be their therapist, right? And you will not be doing anything beyond what you are comfortable doing. There are people, thank goodness, there are people in our world, in our communities, who do this for a living. And so that's where you need to focus sending folks. But always remember, you were the first one that they talked to. And wow, there's just nothing more wonderful than that. So don't be afraid of it, okay? I will ask you, if you want to be a person they come to, then you have to do a few things that will help you feel more comfortable to be that person. The first one is to become educated, to read all you can about domestic violence, to know the signs in the victims, right? And to actually look for behavioral signs in the victims, and then signs in the offenders, right? Because that's what you want to look for too, because you'll see it. So become educated. 3 things. First thing, become educated. Secondly, publicize the problem. How do you do that? Speak from the pulpit. Find portions of the Bible that quote the prophets and violence. And I gave you one example of Isaiah, and there are many, many in the Bible that quote the prophets about the issue of violence. Include this issue in your church bulletins, right? I'm wondering if maybe you couldn't have an article in there or something in there, or just a little blurb about domestic violence has no place in our congregation, a simple sentence, right? Invite a speaker. I don't know how many of you know this, but October is National DV Prevention Month. So invite a speaker in, right? Or even consider donating a portion, even a small portion of the monies collected on a specific Sunday, maybe in October, to a local shelter. And make sure people in the community know that's what you're doing, because it says that you know about this, you care about this. The third thing is to recognize your limitations. And I said that a little bit before. Domestic violence is an astoundingly complex issue, right? You cannot address this alone, and you should not address this alone. You should reach out to people who can help you. You should form some partnerships, if you can, with those organizations and agencies. Call them up. Say, look, I am the pastor of this congregation. I'd just like to know who you are. I'd like you to know I'm here. I'd like you to know I'm willing and able to refer anybody to you if the need be. Know how to refer to a shelter, right? What's involved? How does that system work, right? And so I'm going to give you some of that information now, so you have a little bit more knowledge about how to refer folks. So we are very blessed in New Jersey. We are a really good state for domestic violence. We have 22 programs around the state. One of the great resources is the New Jersey Coalition to End Domestic Violence. But we have Department of Children and Families funds domestic violence programs in all 21 of our counties. And here are some of the things that those programs do. They have a 24-hour hotline. They have 24-hour access to a safe shelter, to a safe house. At those safe houses, they have counseling, support services, and advocacy for victims as well as their children. And many of the shelters now also have accessibility for pets, because one of the things that often keeps a woman from leaving and taking the children is they have a pet and they can't leave that pet. And I know at one point I told you, I think it was in another program, that I was at a shelter where an offender sent in an envelope the ear of this woman's cat and said, now, next week I'll send you the other ear if you don't come home. So pets often are the reason they don't leave. They want to bring them with them so they're safe, and so the children have a sense of having that pet and that support person with them. These core services also include legal, financial, and housing advocacy. They can find housing and help equip a person to have a new start. They offer community education, and this is where you folks come in. They come out and speak to people about domestic violence. So that was why I said it might be nice to invite somebody in to talk to your community. I want to give you a couple of resources. Legal Services of New Jersey is wonderful. And Central Jersey Legal Services is as well. You see here what the Legal Services does. It represents folks in court. It also helps folks prepare letters and routine legal documents, technical assistance. It also offers training to domestic violence advocates, programs, attorneys, and others. So this is where a lot of our shelter advocates, our shelter staff may go to legal services, so they have some idea when they counsel these victims at the shelter that they know what they're talking about. And then the Legal Services of New Jersey Representation Project, the number is here for you. And then the New Jersey Legal Services, the number is there for you as well, just to kind of give you some actual numbers and resources. We also have something called the New Jersey Address Confidentiality Program, and that is a hotline number. Let me explain a little bit about what that is. It provides services. It's not just limited to domestic violence, but it does provide services for folks who want to know about domestic violence. They want to refer somebody. They are advocating for someone. They want to have some application procedures done. So this is another good number for you folks to remember. I think a very helpful one. So I just want to say to you one more time what I said earlier. You are blessed to play an incredibly important role in advocating for victims by speaking out and speaking up. And I want to just encourage you, and especially now with this pandemic, there are so many people being hurt in their homes, so many people. So I hope some of this information will help you if and when, or maybe some of you are getting together. You know what to look for, you know what to watch, you know what to listen for, and then you know a little bit about how you can talk to that person, right? But please keep in mind, the clergy, no matter what form it is, has always been an integral part of all of our lives. I can remember the role that the family priest played in our lives, and I can remember how I felt like I could talk to him about anything, because, first of all, because of confidentiality, and second of all, because I felt like it was an outside person that could be helpful, that seemed to know a lot. When I was little, he knew everything. As I grew up, I realized he didn't know everything, but he sure was a compassionate and wonderful person. So you are blessed to have people come to you. Don't be afraid of it. Be honored by it. And I want to just finish with this last quote because I think it's really quite beautiful. The Lord tries the righteous, but the wicked and him that loves violence in his soul hates. I especially like expose deeds of darkness and bring secrets out into the light. And that's really what you folks do in the position that you're in. So I want to just thank you for being here today and listening to this, and I hope that it is helpful. And I will be sure to send a copy of this to Estelle and Eric so they have it. And that way you have something where you can, have something where you can write, you can see it and not necessarily have to have this video and keep replaying it to get a number. So Estelle, I'm going to turn it back to you or to Eric. And again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Pat, for this insightful webinar and the tools that you have provided. Thank you so much. God bless you and your work.
Thank you.